Thank you. Dankeschön.
Guten Tag. Welcome to Munich, Sofia Coppola. Willkommen hier im Saal. Ich hoffe, alle sprechen Englisch. Wenn nicht, würde ich danach persönlich alles im Einzelgespräch übersetzen. Dann ist es nicht so. Genau. I think I don't really have to introduce you anymore. So just shortly, your father is by now, among other personal achievements, the father of Sofia Coppola. You've made 6 feature films by now, starting 1999 with The Virgin Suicides, the adaptation of Jeffrey Eugenides' great novel. Then, almost precisely every 3 years, you present another new film. There was The Unforgettable Lost in Translation, 2003, with Scarlett Johansson, and of course Bill Murray. Then Marie Antoinette, which was your second collaboration with Kirsten Dunst. Then 2010 brought us Somewhere, the story of a father and a daughter, followed by The Bling Ring, based on the true story of some teenagers who broke into the Hollywood homes of celebrities like Paris Hilton and stole their belongings, which I read to you was like a horror movie, the whole story. Yeah. And now you're here with a film for which you just won the prize for Best Direction at Cannes Film Festival, The Beguiled. Roughly, without giving away too much for the audience, what's the plot?
Okay. The story takes place in a southern girls' school during the Civil War, but it's not about the war. That's in the background. It's a group of women, very isolated, and the war was going on for several years at this point, and they haven't been around any men for many years, and they find a wounded northern enemy soldier who's wounded, and they take him in and nurse him back to health, and he finds himself kind of trapped in their world, and you see what happens. Are you going to watch it tonight here?
Yes,
okay.
they're showing it tonight. It's a premiere. And at first, the story sounds like a male fantasy coming true, like one man being taken care of by seven women altogether, from age 12, I guess, up to in their 40s. But then it turns into something much darker, something in between a thriller and maybe still a comedy, though, a dark comedy. I don't know, whatever the genre might be called. Is there a genre?
I don't know. It feels a little bit more like a genre film in that it's sort of Southern Gothic and there's elements of a thriller, but it has a lot of humor. So I'm happy that people know it's okay to laugh. I think so. Yeah, it's sort of a mix of things, but I like that the story starts kind of in this fantasy and turns darker in a, I think, unexpected way. So.
I read about this Southern Gothic, but we in Germany, or at least I had never heard of it. What is a Southern Gothic as a genre?
A Gothic style.
Southern Gothic.
Yeah. Well, the South in America is very specific, and it has a kind of dark history with. I don't know how to describe it. It's just something I talk about all the time without actually thinking about it. But there's sort of the heightened drama, and the South is very specific. You'll see in the film it's very dramatic with large oak trees and Spanish moss, and the gate of the school has spikes on it, and there's always something dark lurking under the beauty, I think, and that's something that there's a certain specific story of that part of America and the South that has a kind of heightened drama and something a little bit scary lurking underneath.
And also a little bit something of Gone with the Wind, right?
Well, it's the South,
it's
women
in
of the
era.
South. Yeah, that era is, and of course, I remember that's my first impression of the South during the Civil War is Scarlett O'Hara and Gone with the Wind, and this film is a different style, but I always think of her when you think about the Southern ladies, and they were. We looked at kind of books at that time that taught women how they should be, and they were all raised to be ladies and to have parties and be taken care of and be
Speak French.
speak French, be charming for men, and then the war came about, and they had to survive, and they had to figure out how to make the land, grow food and all these things that they weren't really prepared for, and they were really raised to be lovely ladies for men, and then all the men were gone, and they're
And then there was one.
yes, and then they come upon this man, and the South, that region of America is very hot, and so in my film you hear the sound. I hope you feel the heat of and you hear the insects and the nature outside, and get into the atmosphere of that part of America.
And for the first time, you didn't use as much music as you do usually, and no pop music that one would know. Or so, is this to make the southern noises more audible, or?
Yeah, and I wanted to really focus on how to make tension in the film, because so much of the film is about tension. So, without music or without, that kind of music, it which alleviates tension. I've tried to keep it very silent and stark, and more the sounds of nature, and to keep the feeling of tension. And there's some kind of ominous tones, but it's much more quiet and stark to hopefully feel the tension of the story.
Mm-hmm. And it is a remake, or more rather a retelling, of a 1971 film starring Clint Eastwood. The director was Don Siegel. And this film was based on a novel which had been totally forgotten, but you read it. Which movie is truer to the book, yours or the first one?
That's a good question. I first knew about the story from the 1971 film that Don Siegel made with Clint Eastwood, and I was struck because it's such a great premise, the story, to talk about men and women in this very kind of dramatic way. But the story taking place in this girls' school was told from the point of view of the soldier, in a very macho male point of view. And I thought, I would love to see this story or make this story, but from the other side, and to look at it from the point of view of the women in the school and what it was like encountering this soldier, and understand them more. So then I found the book that was out of print, and the book is written in the point of view. Each chapter is a different girl telling her story. So I read more about kind of their side. I mean, it's still a pulpy book written by a man. It's not, it's a pulp fiction, but it was fun to think more about it and then edit which elements I wanted to make for my film and which parts I wanted to take out.
Mm-hmm. I watched the original movie, and it's from today's perspective, it's really a very strange film, because it is funny, but I think it is not even meant to be funny. I mean, you just have to laugh at it because it's so strange. You watched it before. Yeah, you watched it. Was it hard to forget because you had to find your own imagery?
It's very like a B movie and exploitation, and it's sort of a classic of that genre. But after I saw it, I tried to forget it, and I didn't watch it again. And then I just went to the book, and I just imagined like how I would tell the story. So I didn't want to replicate his movie at all, and I tried to just take the elements that I was drawn to, and then not include parts that I didn't connect with as much. And but yeah, I tried to forget about it and just imagine it anew, looking at the book, how I would tell the story, combined on the book and also just my imagination of, girls I know and relationships. And I was interested in, I think, the way that women communicate, which I think is different than men, which there's a lot that's nonverbal, that between women you can say a lot with a glance or a tone, and so there's a lot of that in the movie that I wanted to explore.
Mm-hmm. And in the book and in the Clint Eastwood movie, there is another character in the story which you took out completely. It's a female black slave. And right now in the internet, that's why I'm mentioning it, it's really like a controversy because they say, how could she edit out the slaves from the story? So first question, why did you do it? And the second question, do you understand at all the controversy?
Yeah, I thought a lot about it when I was editing the story, and to me, I'm not making a movie about the Civil War. I really wanted to keep the focus on this group of women, and the slave character in the book was and in the original film was very stereotypical, and I didn't want to make a stereotype of the slave character on the side. I feel like that's such an important story that I don't want to treat that lightly, and it deserves to have its own film about it. But for this story, I wanted to keep the focus on this group of isolated women. And at that time, a lot of the slaves had left, and they were really isolated, and keep the focus on this group of women and not about racial politics and not about the war. And I tried to keep all of the reality and horror of that war outside the gates and in the distance, and it's really focused on these women interacting with a man. And it's really not about the Civil War. It could take place anytime. And that's what I liked about it, is I think there's themes that I think I can connect to, and I hope a modern audience can connect to, that are universal, and it's not about really the time that it's set in.
Mm-hmm. And the cast is incredible. It's Nicole Kidman and Kirsten Dunst, Elle Fanning and Colin Farrell. And for sure, in a few years from now, the others will be famous too, because you have a history of making young actresses famous. In your experience, who needs more attention from a director? Insecure newcomers or big stars?
Oh, that's a good question. I tried to give attention to all of my actors, and it was great that the younger actresses became friends and spent time together, and they feel like a group. But I really and Nicole Kidman as the headmistress of the school and the most experienced of the actresses really took that role on set, and making sure that the younger actresses were all participating in the dramatic scenes. And so we had a nice group, and I tried to share my focus on them all.
And The Beguiled is very much an ensemble film. It's almost as intimate as a theater play, as it takes place almost entirely in one house. Did you rehearse a lot before?
I was drawn to the story in that it all takes place in one setting, and it is almost like a play where the focus is really on the characters and the dialogue and their interaction, and it's very claustrophobic. And we shot the film on the framing. The aspect ratio is called 1:6:6. It's a little bit tighter frame. It's not widescreen, so you feel the claustrophobia, I hope, of the story. But I was really drawn to the story in that I could just do it in one location and really focus on this very kind of simple but tight story and the dynamics between these characters all trapped together.
Mm-hmm. It's also literally, it's quite a dark film. Did you use only natural light or candlelight, or does it just look that way?
It looks like that, but Philippe Lessourde, the cinematographer, who was so great to work with, we spent a lot of time in the preparation to talk about the look and to make sure we felt it looked authentic to that time, and that the lighting was real, and to really consider the sunlight, and at night that it's lit by candles. And we did tests with different kinds of special candles that made more light, and so hopefully it gives the feeling of what it was like to live at that time.
Mm-hmm. What were the visual references that helped you and your team to find the right tone or the right style for this?
Yeah, whenever I start a film, I think about the world, that what it looks like and what it sounds like, to give the atmosphere of the world that I hope the audience will go into, and what suits the story. It's always in the visuals are in support of the story I want to tell. And this story reminded me a little bit of Virgin Suicides, and I thought about similar references of those kind of 70s photography of girls and nature and this kind of soft world, and making it very feminine and delicate, so that hopefully the audience can go in, and when the story turns, it's a surprise, which for me it was when I saw it. And I like that the soldier comes in and he thinks that he's in this fantasy of lovely ladies and lace pillows, and he doesn't expect how the story turns.
No one does. I read that you learned from your father that one good thing before you start shooting is inviting all the actors to have a meal together, in character, in costume. What effect does that have?
Yeah, my dad came from the theater, so I always ask him about his rehearsal process, because he has a lot of games that he likes to do before and things to get the actors together. And he really taught me about how it's helpful to have the actors bond together and spend time doing activities as the characters. And it's just kind of getting used to the characters and bonding together in that way. And he always felt, or what he told me is that when they make a meal together and they eat together, something about the sensory of that exercise kind of makes them always remember that, and you kind of make fake memories for your characters. And so doing these kind of improvisations, and when they're around food, I guess somehow you remember it in a different way, and it becomes about the senses of being in that character. So I always try to do that, and on this we spent time together, and Nicole Kidman and the girls all spent some time in a house of that time in costumes, making meals and doing classes and Bible study and dance lessons, and just so that when they were filming in the house, they had kind of this history and background together of how women spent time then, and learning to sew and things we might not know today.
And you were with them, or they were on them?
I was with them, but I was just kind of observing and just letting them, kind of experience being those women together.
And you only shot the film in 26 days, and this was last fall, so it was really very fast experience. Or do you always move so fast once you shot?
This one was especially fast. We, we wanted to keep the budget small so that I could have creative freedom, and we shot in New Orleans and Louisiana last fall, and then because they decided to release it this summer, it was a very fast schedule to finish the post-production. We edited in New York with the editor. Her name's Sarah Flack, who I've worked with on all my films except for the first, and then we were trying to finish it in time to bring it to Cannes, and now it's coming out. So it's been a very fast schedule. So it's good because it's fresh in my mind to talk about. But yeah, I've been like in a bubble of this world since we shot it last fall.
And is there something purely practical, very concrete that you've learned from your father as far as directing is concerned? Maybe even just from watching him.
I think I learned so much just from spending time on his set, and I didn't even realize that I was, taking it in and learning. But he also was always wanting to talk about film, so I feel lucky to have a great teacher. And he always told us that that the acting and the story were the most important part. That you have to make sure you have a good script and focus on the acting, and then anything else. But that was the core of the focus of what needs to be good to make a good film. So I always start with that.
And how are you with actors? I don't know, in this film, I would think maybe you were like a girlfriend or a bigger sister, or not even older, but...
No, I mean, Kirsten Dunst, I've known her since she was 16, so I've always felt like a big sister to her. And then Elle Fanning I met when she was young, and we've stayed close, but it's always, such a thrill for the director to see all your actors come together and bring your story to life. So I'm always, I have a warmth for them because I'm grateful that they're, really making themselves vulnerable and dedicating themselves to the story. So we had a nice atmosphere on our set. It's always stressful because you have to work very quickly and it's expensive, so every minute is very precious and there's a lot to do. But it's like a family atmosphere because you're all there together, you're working long hours, and everyone puts a lot of heart into it.
Once your father, Francis Ford Coppola, visited you on the sets of Virgin Suicides and told you afterwards you need to say action louder because they need to know who's in charge. You still don't, do you?
No, I don't. I appreciate what he was saying, but he was, anxious for me, and then I thought, I just have to be myself and do it my way, and luckily, I think as long as you're clear and you really know what you want to make, people sense that. They know if you're clear on what you want to make, and they respect that and help you. But I think it's really important to be clear about what you're making and understand what it is.
And you always I think you always seem so calm and so soft-spoken. Are you ever nervous or close to a nervous breakdown on set?
No, I'm good at hiding my stress. That's all. I do get stressed, but I don't think you're the leader, so it's not going to help anyone if you panic. So I keep calm, and I got my demeanor from my mother. My mother's very calm, so I think I got that from her, thankfully. But yeah, I do get stressed, but I think I hide it well.
Because you just mentioned your mother, she's here too at the Filmfest with her first feature film, and she is 80.
Yeah.
That's so great.
Yeah, she made her first film at 80. She's 81 now, but it's very exciting. She's younger, more energetic than anyone I know, and always encouraged my brother and I to make art projects, and always brought us to see museum exhibits, and she worked really hard she worked for 6 years to get her film made and didn't give up. So I get strength from her too.
Mm-hmm. And before she had only done this documentary on Apocalypse Now?
Yeah, she did a lot of different kinds of art projects where she's made fine art and she made a documentary, and she did kind of conceptual art and sound installation. So she's done a lot of different kinds of art projects, and she wrote 2 books. And I think I got that from her, that you can express yourself in many different ways. But this is her first narrative film.
So it's still a surprising act at 80.
Yeah. No, it's exciting that you can discover new sides of yourself at any age.
And is it true that you ask your producer to yell or scream for you if screaming is necessary? Like good cop, bad cop style?
No, we don't have any screaming on my set. It's not. I want to make a nice atmosphere to work in, so we don't have any yellers. But my producer, he can be tough, but always in a polite way.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And would you say you were a shy person?
Yeah, I'm pretty shy, but on set.
Yeah, you know what you want, and you.
Yeah, when I'm on set, I know what I want, and I'm okay to talk here because it's specific, and I can just respond to you.
I'm shy too.
We're doing okay.
Okay. Is it true that Bill Murray calls you the Velvet Hammer?
Oh yes, I'm very proud of that nickname.
And how does a velvet hammer get things done?
I mean, I think he means that you can be, delicate but still be strong, and I try to just stay true to my personality, but I'm very determined and stubborn as a person, as you have to be. So when someone says no, then I just keep finding another way and keep asking until I am able to do what I want.
I know that you have told this story a lot, but can you, for the first time in Munich, tell how you hunted down Bill Murray until he finally committed to playing in Lost in Translation? Yes,
when I was writing my script of Lost in Translation, I wrote it thinking of Bill Murray, and he was the only person I wanted to make it with. I wasn't going to make the movie with anyone else, so I really wanted to make the film. And Bill Murray doesn't have an agent, and he's very mysterious. He has it had his post office box, and he had a voicemail. You could leave a message, and I'd left messages for probably a year, and sent letters, and.
How often did you leave a message? Like every month, or?
Probably. I felt like a stalker, like a crazy person, but I was so focused on I have to find Bill Murray, and anybody I would meet, like, do you know Bill Murray? And then finally, a friend of mine who's a writer. I was old friends with him from Saturday Night Live, and I asked him to look at my pages of my script I was writing, and he thought it was interesting and something he could see Bill doing, so he helped me and finally got in touch with him, and then finally I got to meet him, and he said he might think about doing it, but he was never very committal, and but I just went to Japan and started making it in the hopes that he would show up, and luckily he showed up. I didn't have a backup plan.
No? And you spent much of your childhood on movie sets, and for Apocalypse Now, you even spent 1 year in the Philippines. I think you were 5 years old.
I think we were there for over 2 years.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, when I was around 5.
Did you speak Spanish?
No, I went to a Chinese school in the Philippines, but they speak Tagalog. But I don't remember any.
Okay.
No. But I enjoyed being there, and that was always fun to go on location with my family and get to live in many different places.
Yeah, it sounds great because the movies are also so great and so famous. But for a child, was it always fun and fantastic to leave your friends ever so often and move someplace else?
Sometimes it was hard especially when I was, at the age where you're really close to your friends in middle school. But so that part was hard, and always going to a new school. But I also it was very exciting. I loved going on location and living in a new place and going, getting to visit the set was always a magical, exciting place to visit.
Mm-hmm. 2 adjectives to describe your childhood.
I don't know. I don't know. It was interesting and exciting.
Okay. What I'm trying to understand, I think, is how much the feeling of isolation, which is a big thing in all of your movies, has to do with you personally.
Yeah, people always ask me that, and I think they expect me to be very melancholic and a loner. But I think when you're writing, or at least for me, when I'm writing, it's a very introspective time where I'm alone and thinking about that side of myself when I'm writing. But then you come out of that, it's sort of like being in a cocoon, and then you come out into life and interact. So I have a side that's joyful and interacting with people too. But I think when I'm writing, I'm more in an introspective side. And I think it would, I'm interested more in writing about characters when they're going through a transition, or that the plot comes from the characters' growth, and which is always hard, I think, to grow and transition into different stages in your life. And so I tend to write more about that, because the in-between, when you're feeling what smooth sailing would be boring to write about, because there's not much happening in that, So I think I definitely feel like I have both sides, but when I'm writing films, I try to be introspective and think about, these aspects that I'm trying to understand.
Mm-hmm. But often it's more a kind of a longing that your characters have. It's more in front of, they're dreaming of a transition to hopefully take place soon. No?
Yeah, I guess they're looking at how, at that point of how to do that. And I feel like, in Marie Antoinette, she's a young girl trying to find her role, and then, by the end she's transformed into a young woman. So I think, and I feel like a lot of my characters, they go through, I don't know, that they're looking at their identity and their role and how to make that transition, I think.
Yeah, it's you could say they are trying to grow up in a way, no?
Yeah, but I think they do. I think they do. I think at the end they're not the same as they were in the beginning. I hope. Mm-hmm.
Ja. Okay. Entschuldigung. Sie wollen fragen.
Okay.
So, hier gleich.
Yes, I love the atmosphere in your movies, and you're also one of the best writers, and I'm interested in the process, how you write. Do you get yourself into a certain mode, or is it just a specific time of the day you can write, or how do you create this atmosphere? Or do you visualize it before in your head?
Yeah, should I repeat the question? Could you hear? He asked how I make the atmosphere, and do I visualize the story, or how do I get into the feeling of the tone of the movie, I guess. And when I start a story, there's always the visuals in my head of what it feels like, or a glimpse. I remember hearing Fellini talk about writing movies like remembering a dream, which I always thought that was the best description that I could relate to, that you're trying to remember sort of fragments of images that you don't quite make sense yet, and to try to put them down until hopefully they come together into some sort of story. So for an original story, I work with starting to write notes and gather images that relate to what I'm thinking about. And when I'm adapting a script like The Beguiled, I went through the book, and it's, as anyone, when you read a book, you imagine the world. So I started to imagine, what it looks like, and the feeling and the colors, and started, gathering images that I could help me talk about the look of and the feeling of the movie with the rest of the crew, because you're collaborating with your team, and so you have to explain it, and it always helps to have, for me, visual references to be able to talk about that.
First of all, hi. I'm too excited to speak just spontaneously, so I wrote my question down, and it's a little long, so sorry. Welcome to Munich, first of all. And
thank you.
I'm an exchange student from Turkey, and I'm majoring in engineering. So, I mean, I haven't had that many professional experience in my life, but I've worked enough to know that it gets quite tough for a woman to be heard and to make a difference in an industry that's male-dominated. And I think you're doing such a great job in that, because I think Hollywood is quite similar. So... And first, I want to thank you for being such a gracious role model for all the young women like me throughout the world. And coming to my question, finally, have you yourself experienced any kind of sexism in your journey as a director? And do you think you would have been acclaimed more positively? I mean, everybody loves you. I know that. Me too. I love you too. But if you were a man, do you think you would have been perceived, more positively, or you would have won more Oscars or whatever?
I never thought about that. I mean, definitely when you asked about if I ever encountered sexism, definitely in an industry that's dominated by men, I've definitely had people be condescending to me and not take me seriously. But I always just try to ignore it, and sometimes, of course, it bothers me, and I'll complain about it to my friends. But I just don't let it deter me, and I just keep going, whether people like it or not. I feel determined to make what I want to make, and I try not to get discouraged by people that don't understand or get it, what I want to do, or or don't take it seriously. So, and I never thought about if I was a man, because I feel. So grateful that I get to express my point of view, and I feel lucky that I get to put a point of view out that isn't out there as much, and hopefully there'll be more and more different ones. So I'm glad that I get to express myself in my way.
Firstly, I'd like to say thank you to introducing me to the band Air from the music from Virgin Suicide. So thank you for that. Okay. Also, at the Marie Antoinette party at Cannes Film Festival, I sneaked in there, and it was the best party I've ever been to, so thank you for that as well. But what I really wanted to say is I think your films are very aesthetic to you. I think you've really got that kind of... You can tell that your films, they're very stylised to your, like Tarantino or Kubrick. I think you've got a very distinctive aesthetic to your films. And my question really is, I've just got some funding to do a film, which is a sort of science fiction matrix, but the subtext is the subtext is sort of anti-Donald Trump thing. But anyway, thank you. What I really wanted to know is, in light of your films and how they've got that unique look, what advice or what could you share with me and with us? How do you kind of create that look, that Sofia look, or how Kubrick does that kind of look? Is there anything that you could share with me for that?
Oh, thank you. I always appreciate seeing a film that's made from a person that you can recognize their stamp and their personality. So I just try to make all the choices based on what I like and in my personality of what I like, but also what suits the film. So I think you have to just make the world as you see it, unique to you and what you like. Does that help?
Yeah.
Is that too vague?
Yeah, watch a lot of films and put your own personality into it.
Sorry?
I suppose it's watching a lot of films and putting your own personality into it.
Yeah, and just taking anything that you like, and I think to trust your instinct and your voice, and just make it exactly how you want to see the film.
Yeah, and sorry for sneaking into the Marie Antoinette.
Oh no, I'm glad you had a good time. Kirsten Dunst was just saying remembering how fun that night was, and I think it helps. I mean, for me, it helps to put visual references together in music and anything you can that helps you create the world you want to make. And good luck with your movie.
Hello, I'm Caroline Carnot, and maybe I repeat myself, but I also want to thank you because I'm so drawn and moved and inspired by your work, and I cannot just put it in words. So thank you for that, first of all. And
Thank you.
Yeah, and also I'm a German actress, and you would never have to hunt me down. Okay, but actually my question is, sorry for that. My question is, what does inspire you for your movies? How do you get your ideas, especially for Lost in Translation? How did that come into your mind to tell that story?
Oh yeah, it's always, I never know where I'm gonna get a story from, so I try to be open to ideas. But with Lost in Translation, I spent a lot of time going to Japan and going to Tokyo in my early 20s when I was at an age where I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life, but I always wanted to make a movie about what it was like to be there, because it was such a different world to me, and I had these nice memories of that time, and I wanted to try to show kind of what my impression of being there then was. So, and I had this idea of sort of a romantic story, but it was a lot about what I was thinking about at the time, at that age, and being young and a marriage that I wasn't sure about. And so I tried to put all of my questions, try to figure out things I was thinking about at that time. And I remember the movie Brief Encounter by David Lean. That made an impression on me, and that I had that a little bit in mind with that story. And I loved Roman Holiday, and just about Brief Encounter really made an impression on me, because it was about just this. I mean, that was more of a love story, but so I had different things in mind, and then I tried to write about what I was thinking about at the time that was important to me, and also capture Tokyo and the fantasy that it would be fun to hang out in Tokyo with Bill Murray.
First of all, I want to thank you for introducing me to Suntory, which I'm a great lover of since your movie, as the picture shows. I want to ask, in your movie, you cut the music quite rapidly, and it gives an interesting tension to it. And
Which movie?
For example, in Lost in Translation, in Somewhere, I have seen in many, many movies that the scene ends and the music also cuts very rapidly from one mood to another. And I wanted to ask, how did you come up with this? Because I do not see practically anyone else doing this.
Oh, I never noticed that. Thank you. I guess I didn't realize that, but in the editing room, and my editor is really good with music, and we just, I think while we're editing, we try out music and decide when it should end, and it's always kind of supporting the emotion of that scene. So
because it gives really interesting mood changes sometimes.
Oh yeah, I guess, I mean, those are all in the editing and the music, how you can figure out the mood or how you want the audience to feel. So
Okay, thanks.
thank you.
We had the opportunity to meet Ed Lachman like a few weeks back. He was at the Munich Film Studio, and he was telling us about that party scene in Virgin Suicides, and that he had a dispute over the color for it, and that he originally wanted it to be pink, and then he turned it green behind your back. And I was wondering if that's just a story you told us, or
He asked me, he met Ed Lachman, the cinematographer for Virgin Suicides, at the school here, and he said that we had a disagreement in the final party scene, that originally I wanted it to be pink and he wanted it to be green, and he did it behind my back. I don't think he did it behind my back. I think we talked about it, and I don't remember wanting it to be pink, but I always remember Ed Lachman being very helpful with me. It was my first movie, and he always really supported how I wanted to do it and was very helpful to me. And I remember the green look was because it was supposed to be a party for poisonous gas. So I don't remember. I don't think I would have ever made it pink, but maybe he suggested the green. But I always remember he was really helpful and supportive to me and how I wanted to shoot the film.
Hello. You said before that for Lost in Translation, you thought Bill Murray was kind of irreplaceable. So for The Beguiled, who do you think for those characters you thought the cast would not be done by anyone else?
Oh, I didn't feel as extreme about that, because Bill Murray is such a one-of-a-kind person he's such a great improviser, and I just really had him in mind specifically for that part. But when I was writing the script for The Beguiled and first thinking about doing the story, I was excited at the idea of getting some of my favorite actresses together because it's an ensemble of women of different ages. And I thought Elle Fanning, now I worked with her when she was 11, and now she's 17, so she could play the oldest student, and Kirsten Dunst could play the teacher. And I've always wanted to work with Nicole Kidman and always really admired her, so I thought she would be great as the headmistress. And getting this group together of women that I love, that I knew and then also didn't know yet, and then getting this young cast together. So I wrote it with those main women in mind, and then I had to find the actor, the male actor, to play with them. So I find it helpful to picture actors when I'm writing, even if they don't end up being the one. It helps me to picture how they would read the part. It's inspiring to me when I'm writing.
So did you get all your first choices?
I did. I feel so lucky. I got my dream cast. I got the women, and when I met Colin Farrell, I really wanted to work with him. And in the book, the character was an Irish immigrant, and so seeing Colin speaking with his accent, I thought it added another element of being exotic to these women. And I feel really lucky. I got the cast that I imagined, my first choice, which, yeah, I felt lucky. Which doesn't happen very often.
I hope that everyone will get to see the new movie and understand all the things we talked about. And okay, one last question. What's the name of the actor?
Colin Farrell.
Yeah, sorry. Colin Farrell, sorry. Colin Farrell, he's very, 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 very likable. I mean, he just has this, you have to like him. Was this a challenge for the film?
It's funny because I liked that he was more sympathetic than the original film and not so obvious at the beginning he's a bad guy, so that the girls could be charmed by him and try to figure out whether they could trust him or not. But at times I worried, is he too sympathetic? Because he is very charming. But I thought it's more interesting to not be black and white and who's the bad guy and who's not, and that that he has different sides, and you have to try to figure it out as you go.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and last question. How do you think that it was for him, the whole experience with so many women? Also the female director.
Yeah, I think he enjoyed it. He was surrounded by women, and I feel like it takes a confident man to let the women be in charge. But he spent half the movie like lying on a lace pillow surrounded by ladies, so I think he had a good experience, and it was fun. And we had women on the crew, and then also men. So it was nice that it wasn't just all men; that there was really a mix of men and women working together. But he was a very nice, good sport about letting us objectify him.
You did a great job, and okay, thank you.
Thank you so much for coming.